everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at the Friday race of the day. It is race 9 at Oaklawn Park, a high-level allowance optional claimer going 1 mile and a 16th on the dirt. Before we get into the analysis, though, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel so you don't miss any of the great content that we've got planned through the rest of this Kentucky Derby season and into the rest of 2025. Furthermore, with this being the Friday race of the day, pause this video, head on over to DRF.com and take advantage of those free pass performances that are available for every race of the day. All you have to do is create a free account and you get free all-access past performances, Classic, Formulator, Timeform US. And this is a pretty interesting race, Mike, so one that you definitely want to take a deeper dive into because we've got 8 runners signed on and plenty of back class in this field. Actually, it's the battle of the Kentucky Derby 4th place finishers from 2023 and 2024, those being Disarm and Catching Freedom.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where these horses go from here. Because listen, they're both obviously really talented, but they've also both got something to prove, I would think, at least in graded stakes races going forward. Again, it's one of those allowance races, David. You only seem to get them at Oaklawn or Keeneland. It's an allowance race with a bunch of stakes horses involved.
Yeah, a lot of back class in this field. We'll see if some of those horses can use this class relief to recapture some of that prior form. And both of those class horses, Catching Freedom and Disarm, do not possess much early speed, Mike. And as we take a look at this Timeform US pace projector, that could be a problem because this pace scenario does look pretty murky. I would imagine they would look to be aggressive with the number 1 Horace Mann, who has shown plenty of speed in some faster paced one-turn dirt races. I think the wild card with the pace is the number 5 Bendoog, who does have the ability to be forward, but getting out of the gate is sometimes a problem for him.
Yeah, that's very true. If he does break cleanly, though, he's going to be right up close in this race, and he's going to have a big say in the outcome, too. I don't know about you, David. I'm a pretty big fan of his, and I think this is probably the right kind of race for him, at least at this stage of the game. As far as the two, sort of maybe headliners are concerned, I know that Disarm really didn't show any speed last year for the most part. He's not a slow horse. I'm not sure what the plan always is with him, but if they decide to get aggressive and he's a little fresher, he could be closer to the pace.
Yeah, the pace projector is based on the recent races, and he just has not shown any of that early speed in his last 4 or 5 starts. That's why he's shown all the way at the back of the pack on the pace projector with that LP flag, indicating that he does have the highest Timeform US late pace rating in this field. Let's go through this field from the rail out, beginning with the number 1, Horace Mann, and kind of a horse that is in some ways the key to this race, Mike, because if he is aggressively ridden to the front end, kind of puts Bendoog into a stalking position and maybe has the opportunity to slow down the tempo of this pace a little bit. And he does have real ability. We saw that 2 back when he earned the 98 buyer, going 7 furlongs at Churchill Downs, beating Track Phantom. That was a race that maybe looked a little better going in than it does coming out. I can easily make an excuse for the last race, though, because they just went at an unreasonable pace on the front end, and it totally fell apart.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be too hard on him for the last one. Prior to that, his dirt form was excellent. And you're right. He's in a lot of ways, he's the key to this race because he's got a great post and he's got speed. And maybe he's able to, sort of pull an easy trip in this race. I thought he was dangerous, and I ultimately couldn't quite talk myself into him. I'm still wondering exactly how far he wants to go. It's not based on his most recent start, but I wonder if he's more of a one-turn kind of 7 or 8 furlong kind of horse.
I went through a similar thought process. I originally had him higher up in my picks, and then as I watched his races more, just not really finishing those 2-turn races, so I wonder about the mile and the 16th here. Mike, can you make any kind of case for the big long shot, the number 2, Zatara, who did win at a generous 21-1 2-back against first-level allowance competition, but stepped up against tougher last time, including the highly regarded Bishop's Bay, and was just no match?
Yeah, it just feels like this race has come up a little too tough for him. I think he pulled off an upset 2-back. I actually thought he ran well in that race, but he's going to have to run better than that against this field.
Among the bigger prices, the one that I can make a case for is the number 3 Classic Car Wash, because we'll take a look at his most recent start, Mike, and I know he only won by a neck. It's kind of hard to believe watching this replay that he even gets up to win this race because he's that horse in the pink silks with the black cap that's in behind the leaders, diving down to the rail, which is typically not where you want to go when you lost some position or trying to make up ground on a closer, but he somehow is able to surge to victory, even though it's only the first finish line at Oaklawn Park with that short stretch run. He's able to get there. He is stepping up against the tougher field than he was facing last time, Mike, but I kind of pick apart his form. Once upon a time, he did have ability and potential. I mean, he placed in the Tampa Bay Derby as a 3-year-old. And for whatever reason, it seems like Mark Casse just decided that he was going to be a one-turn sprinter after that and just ran him in all of these 6 and 7 furlong races. I always thought this horse wants to go longer. He's only gotten a couple of chances at it in the past year, and one of them being his last race. I do think he still has some upside coming in here.
I agree with everything that you just said. I looked at him the exact same way, and I appreciate that after the layoff, he's come back with 2 improved starts so far this year, right here at Oaklawn. I liked his last race quite a bit. Listen, he's going to be a big price in here. These horses are always tough for me to try to make money on, David, though, because he's got the 4, the 5, and the 8 in this field. And if any one of those 3 shows up and runs their good race here, I don't think Classic Car Wash can beat them.
I'd agree with that, but all of these horses do have major questions to answer, and probably heading that list is the number 4, Catching Freedom, who we'll move to next. Mike, I'm not exactly sure what there is to like about this horse's last performance. He was just awful in the mine shaft coming back off the layoff. And we did a preview of that race, and I think I threw up this unbelievably strong stat for Brad Cox. When he brings horses back off layoffs, they typically run, they typically win. And Catching Freedom just did not have anything to offer in the stretch of that race. I know the pace was slow, but I did mention, I think when we did that preview, I saw one of his workouts prior to that race, and it was very concerning because he could not keep up with a horse that was previously on race that made his debut and was unable to win first time out. So I just wonder where this horse is at this point in his career.
Yeah, he did not run well off the long layoff last time. Obviously, he had a right to need a race, and coming back into graded stakes races maybe is enough of an excuse. And he did look like, to me anyway, like he got very tired in the final furlong there. So listen, maybe he needed it, but to me, I don't know. I think he's still got a lot to prove. I'll just put it that way. I've never been a big fan of his. And I also just feel like, David, to me, he's a one-run closer. He's a horse that you have to take back and let him make one run. You can't try to keep him up close to the pace because he won't finish. And that just may not work in a race like this one.
And we're being pretty hard on this horse, but let's not forget, he was really good at one time. I mean, he was not a lucky 4th in the Kentucky Derby. He was running at those horses at the end and had run some big races coming in there. Just remains to be seen if he is still that same horse as a 4-year-old. The number 5, Bendoog, I think we mentioned earlier, if he shows up, he could be a real tough foe for some of these horses that are trying to recapture their best form coming off layoffs, because he's coming off a really good effort when he earned a 97 buyer at Aqueduct. We'll take a look at the stretch run of that race, Mike, and we're not showing the beginning, but this is one of those races in which he did not get out of the gate alertly and had to do some work to make the front end. Was run down at the end, but you could see he fights all the way to the wire. When he shows up, he's awfully tough to beat.
Yeah, he's a good horse, and if again the break is key for him, but if he does break, he's got plenty of speed, and he could easily make the lead in a race like this one and just make himself really, really dangerous, cutting back just slightly in distance here. But I do think maybe a little shorter is also better for this horse. I don't know. I just thought he was pretty easy to make a case for.
Mike, we follow the New York circuit very closely. Are you a little concerned that almost everybody out of that race has fallen apart since then? I mean, Watch, Law Professor. I mean, even if you look at the 4th and 5th place finishers, they've all come back to run poorly. So is that a minor concern for the validity of that buyer?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, I don't know about the validity of that buyer, just because at that time Law Professor was still really good, and so was the 3rd place finisher. I don't know. Obviously, they've come out of that, and things have just gone horribly wrong, particularly for the winner. I don't know what's gone wrong with Law Professor, but he's been terrible. But at the time, he was in really good form, and I thought Bendoog ran really well in that race.
We talked about one Mark Casse horse. The other one is the number 6, In a Jam, who's got some major surface questions to answer in this race. He'll be trying the dirt for the first time since his 2-year-old season. And they did start him out like they intended to make him into a dirt horse, but he just proved that he was a little better on the turf at that point in time. They went to the synthetic surface last time, Mike, and he actually ran a really nice race against a tough field of handicap horses. That was a stakes quality event at Gulfstream Park. And maybe that's giving Mark Casse the idea that he deserves one more chance on the dirt, having shown that versatility to at least handle the synthetic. He does have pedigree for dirt.
He does. He just hasn't run well on it. And any of that, I know those starts they're a long time ago. You got to go back a couple of years, but he was just bad in those races, David. And it's not like he was just a bad horse at that time. I mean, immediately got better when they switched surfaces with this horse. I don't know, man. I do like his recent form. I don't like him switching surfaces.
I struggle to make a case for the number 7 Tonka Warrior, who's going to be a big price in this race. He's run a few buyers in the low 90s that I guess put him on the fringes of being competitive here, but he's a horse that just doesn't have much early speed, Mike, so tough to see him work out the right trip.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like the right spot for him. He's an okay horse. He's got a race or two that would, give him a shot to at least hit the board in here. But it just feels like he's not in the right spot.
And Trip could also be key to the chances of the outside horse, the number 8 Disarm, who, as we talked about, they just took him way off the pace in all of his recent starts last year. And it wasn't just the jockey. It seemed like this horse just lost some of that early speed. He wasn't quick away from the gate, particularly two back in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, where he was just off slowly and took a long time to find his best stride. And that's kind of been a theme with him recently. He takes a while to sort of warm to the task during his races, but he really was finishing at the ends of those races, Mike, against way tougher company than he's facing here. You could argue this is just a starting point for him, but this horse does have a high ceiling.
He does. We'll see if they're just giving him a race off the layoff here, or if they're actually got him pretty tight. It looks like, I haven't seen any of his workouts, but just looking at him on the page, he's been going for a while here. He's got a nice long series of breezes into him, and they look pretty solid to me as well. So maybe Asmussen's got this horse tight enough off the layoff. Trip's going to be important to him. He's a really good horse. He was disappointing last year as a 4-year-old. I'll be interested to see what Asmussen gets out of him this year.
Yeah, at a short price, I think you do have to recognize Steve Asmussen has not had the Oaklawn Park meet that I think they would have hoped for, winning at only 10% with a lot of starters, and has particularly not had success using his son Keith. The ROI with the two of them at this meet, I think, is below $1 on a $2 wager. So just some concerns for me with a horse that's going to be a short price with the connections. Let's take a look at our picks for this Friday race of the day, Mike. And I know you've got a real affinity for Disarm. He's a horse that you've tried in some pretty tough spots in the past, so you're going to go for him here.
Yeah, I'm going to try to let him work his way back into my good graces. I really liked him as a 3-year-old. He totally lost me last year, but I still think he's good. I'm hoping he fires one off the layoff here. I put Bendoog second. I know I got the two favorites, 1-2 in here, David, but I just couldn't get that clever.
And I know I'm reaching a little bit with the number 3 Classic Car Wash because he's going to need Catching Freedom, Bendoog, and Disarm to all not run their best races. But I do have some major questions about all 3 of those horses. And I do think Classic Car Wash ran one of his best races in a long time last time and is going to be a price. So 3-5-8-1 for me and 8-5-4-3 for Mike in the Friday race of the day, race 9 at Oaklawn Park. Good luck if you're playing the races later this week.